Have you been wondering about these worldwide sightings of UFOs, orbs, and so-called drones? Did you know that the massively popular series Stranger Things, coming up in its 5th season, is based upon a very real secret government program known as the Montauk Project? In order for us to collectively liberate humanity and enter into our Star Trek future, the general public must come to understand the truth of secret space programs, super soldier operations, extraterrestrials, military abductees, and other nefarious schemes that continue to this day. The full disclosure movement works not only to educate and whistleblow, it shall rally the global movement for justice, healing, and reconciliation as regards all of these matters. Ever wondered how we can work together to achieve our Star Trek future? Well, look no further than the 2025 Full Disclosure Now conference. Over 4 days and nights, we will have world-class presenters on 2 different stages, with each night capped by a special event dinner with the speakers and live music performances, and of course, the finale dinner costume contest. While this is a conference with serious disclosure content, we do encourage costumes and for people to have an all-around great time. And of course, don't forget to join us after the conference for our amazing and free sister event, Day of Being 5.0 in their 5th year, gathering starseeds and lightworkers at nearby Indian Shores Beach. For more information, go to fulldisclosuremovement.org. Hello, everybody. This is the very first podcast for the upcoming Full Disclosure Network, and I am your host, Brian Sang, the Solar Bee. I'm very excited today to be introducing our very first guest, of course, and that would be Trevor Grassi. I got to meet Trevor about 2 years ago. I believe it was at a contact in the desert, and he struck me as being a very dedicated guerrilla researcher, archaeologist, Egyptologist. And I knew back then that he was heading places because I saw the drive and his level of knowledge and the fact that most Egyptologists aren't necessarily going to contact in the desert and speaking of all the other quote unquote alternative hypotheses for things like what's happening in Egypt right now. We've got a worldwide phenomenon where the CAFRE Research Project have possibly discovered giant areas underneath the main pyramids on the Giza Plateau. And we'll let Trevor get more into that. But Trevor happened to be there in Egypt at the time. He frequents that Giza Plateau and those pyramids in that region quite a bit. And he is direct friends with the Italian CAFRE Research Project team. And from what I've seen, he's basically an unofficial spokesperson and a CAFRE Research Project whisperer for the world. He's in huge demand. And so having seen him and met him contact in the desert briefly a couple of years ago, and then again, I think it was at Ascension Fest with Jimmy Church at the Luxor in Las Vegas last year. Since then, he's basically part of this worldwide awakening phenomenon. So with that, let's bring Trevor on. Hey, Trevor.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to see you again. Yeah, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was Contact in the Desert, but I remember the Disclosure Fest there with Stars one. I wasn't
Okay.
in 2019. I don't know if you're at that one. That was the last one before COVID, and it got stopped for a few years after that. But it's great to talk with you anyway. Thanks so much for having me on. It's an honor to be your first guest here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Trevor, if you could tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be, even tangentially or involved as a friend of the research team. And then I know that we also wanted to speak about not just the Egyptian pyramid, but the pyramids in Egypt, but you had a lot to share with us also regarding Romania. and Buseji Mountains in particular.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's being a live presentation. I don't know if people are going to be presenting questions in the side. I can't really see any of that going on, but if there are any questions popping up, I'd be happy to jump on whatever people would like to ask me. But yeah, if we have time, I would love to get into this subject of the Romanian Sphinx, it's called, in the Bacigi Mountains, Romania. It's a very, very important subject that I think hasn't quite been brought before the public in the way it should be yet. So that's one subject I would love to just get into, because having a lot of interview requests lately, to be honest, I don't want to be repeating too many.
Let's jump into it. Let's jump into it, because we love to embrace the woo. And as I was saying earlier, you've become so, because you're attached to this worldwide phenomenon. You've been, I'm sure you've gotten to, and I speak to your background. Please speak to what you want to share with us about Buseji and Romania, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can introduce myself a little bit first, but we could get into that in a second. And yeah, that, I think it's a rather large subject that it might make a nice central theme to get into, because it has a lot of crossover with the kind of stuff you report on, and a lot of our other mutual friends, Montauk and things like that, ties into a lot of it. But where I got started, it came from when I was about 18 and just graduating high school. That was when I met John Anthony West, who's the legendary rogue Egyptologist who toppled the entire, timeline of the origin of civilization, together with Dr. Robert Schoch. And I think probably a lot of your viewers will be somewhat familiar with them, at least. But I kind of, I was just getting out of high school, and, I met John, who was just this master. He was the world-renowned authority, being basically the foremost Egyptologist on the planet. And everyone who wanted to go there wanted to go on his tours. I was at least wise enough at that time to recognize his genius, and to see, like, wow, I have this personal access to one of the people who is more informed about this subject than anyone on earth. And I jumped into it from there, because I became close with his whole family, and I was over at his house all the time. Before that time, I kind of had a passion for trying to, I had recognized that there was basically something wrong with the world. And I was looking for the answer, how to fix it, what would it take, And when I met John, I kind of realized that the answer to those things, it can really be found in the ancient past. And that's maybe the only place where it can be found, because I realized that there's answers to be found in the past that related to who we are as a species, where we came from. And this is something that, without it, humanity's just really wandering in the darkness. If we don't know who we are as a race, as a species, the origins of civilization, we're really clueless. And that's one of the first things we need to resurrect and bring back, revive from these ancient times. We can build a new world and actually, build the future. As I did just release my interview with Armando May and Filippo Biondi of the Copper Project, and this is what Filippo said so beautifully in his final comments. He was saying the same thing as I say, like this. It's really about discovering who we are as a species and where we came from. And until we do that, we're really pretty handicapped as far as, figuring out where we're going. So, I think it has to do with, that's a good one. I could mention that slide quick, actually. That is one of the slides that they presented in their press conference on the 15th and 16th, which is now available on Facebook or on YouTube with subtitles, or in English. They have the dub version out now too. And that right there is one of the images that no one besides me, as far as I know, has brought up at all. Nobody's talked about this. That is actually a scan going straight from the Copper Pyramid to the Sphinx. Yeah, you see over on that left side of that line right there, that's actually cutting right through the body of the Sphinx. That's the Sphinx temple there. And no one is talking about this one. it's another thing that makes me think nobody's really watching their press conference like I am over and over to make sure I'm really seeing what they're saying correctly. But that is actually showing these same structures all along the Sphinx Causeway. And when Corrado Malonga was presenting this, he was talking about this, that all along those are going maybe 1,200 meters deep, just as deep as this stuff that's under the Copper Pyramid. It's going all the way over to the Sphinx from there. Yeah.
And Trevor, so I know that the conventional wisdom is like, and it seems like the Egyptian government has made it very difficult to access under that area to even confirm it one way or the other. But what you're saying is, on the one hand, directly under the pyramids, the CAFR Research Project has found these gigantic chambers and columns that lead way deep down. It seems like almost like a mile.
Yeah, about that. They go 648 meters down to these cubes, and then below the cube, there's more, some degree of structures going down, maybe another 600 meters below that. The cubes themselves are 80 meters squared. So yeah, it's going down to 1.2, 1.4 kilometers, and some of the structures down to 2 kilometers. So yeah, over a mile deep, which is pretty wild. As a reference, you can actually, if you look at the pyramids from above, the outer 2 corners of the outer 2 pyramids, that length is about 1 kilometer exactly. So the distance of the 3 pyramids, like the width of all 3 of them together, that equals about 1 kilometer. You double that and go down. We're talking about the Giza Plateau not being a plane, but an actual volume, not just 2-dimensional, surface structures, but a 3-dimensional shape that goes so deep into the ground.
And then Trevor, you kind of really, I think, dropped a real bombshell there, because you're saying that in addition to what the CAFR Research Project may have uncovered with their synthetic aperture radar scanning, I believe it is, you're saying that from here all the way over to the Sphinx complex, or the Sphinx and over here, there may be further types of underground structures and caverns?
Yeah, I could actually say quite a bit about that. But that image you're seeing above, you can see the lines pinpointing where it is on the line. Those lines are going down to these specific shafts you can see the openings of on the satellite image. And so, yeah, all of those are, that's like a slice right down through where that red line is. You're seeing, basically it looks like tubes like that the entire way across.
Okay, now I'm getting it. So this scan right here is matching up, and then here's the shafts found directly under the pyramid, and then pyramids with this one in particular, and then we've got all the way further down. So if it's that deep, and this is showing that depth that is up to that 2 kilometers right here on the right, then that means that
cubes
that
you were
so
just
is this. Yeah, these are right here, but these could be openings. You're saying all the way deep down, and there are surface accesses to these shafts.
Yeah, those shafts you can see the opening of on the satellite image. Those are shafts that all go down about 100 feet or more, but they connect into all this stuff that's lower. Those shafts might be all that kind of greenish layer up towards the top, but they're really connecting into these other structures. Corrado was talking about. He's saying all of this stuff looks like it's going at least like 1,200 meters down, kilometers.
Okay. So I got to ask you that the big question is, many of us in the community have noted that when you look at the pyramids and then the 8 columns, and then it seems like there's some kind of spiral structure around the columns going all the way down to like these blocks. They look like giant electroculture rods and resonators. And so is that what you think it is, or do you think it's something else?
I think it could be related to that. I've studied electroculture quite a bit, and you do see people using these copper coils going down. And I make orgonite and tensor rings, which are kind of all along the same lines of that. basically kind of generating a current or a flow of energy that ends up creating it ends up basically creating fertility. Like if you put these coils in your garden, it's going to help
because of that positive and negative charge. Now, Trevor, I have to ask from our live audience, we're getting a comment that your audio is a little rough to hear now. Do you have a headset or anything like that?
I did have a fan on. I just turned it off. Is that any better?
There might be, and maybe if you sit a bit closer up to the microphone, just on it.
Yeah, maybe a little better.
It's a little bit better. It's just some echo, I think, but we that's life, and the show must go on. We continue on, and yeah. So as you're saying, so there is that electroculture aspect, and you're in agreement that it is indeed quite possible that here's a way to pull energy up from the earth and then resonate it up through these giant columns all the way up to the pyramids and outwards from there.
Possibly, yeah. I just turned my volume up.
That sounds a bit better.
Okay. Yeah, I have this USB mic. It just never works. But, I actually brought this up to Filippo and Armando, and I said, I asked them, one of the questions I asked was about the potential function, because this is getting into speculation, and they're very careful about what they say, scientists, not to overstep, but they did answer these more speculative questions too. And I brought up like Chris Dunn and the pyramid power plant theory in general, which is kind of a wide array of things from a chemical plant or some kind of alchemical laboratory, or geothermal plant somehow reaching down into the earth to get that heat to do something related to it, or any basically theory that ties into the idea of the pyramids as being harvesters, producers, generators, or wireless distributors of energy, which might take many forms, not just electromagnetic, but other kinds of energy. I mentioned that to them. Part of me was thinking, what if these spirals we're seeing were actually conductive material? What if it was copper or gold wrapping around? They're actually hollow tubes, but you're muted. I can't. I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm just nodding along. I'm saying exactly. I'm saying exactly what you're saying is like it looks like electroculture spirals, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was copper in there. Now, have they been able to confirm, or do these scans, are they able to differentiate between materials to say, hey, this might be a metal versus a stone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I asked them as well because I was wondering specifically about those, which. I should say are not columns as much as, they might be structural supports, but they are hollow. So I think they're tubes with some kind of material, and the spiral is some kind of material, or an empty space. It's like a walkway or pathway, potentially. But they told me that basically they, if they're working hypotheses at least, which they make sure to say right off the bat that they don't want to speculate until we can actually go down there and see this stuff and investigate it firsthand, which we are working on. And believe me, a lot of people think it's impossible. It's not. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. We've been with William Brown and my other friends I've been working with. We've been working on that for quite some time, and we know everything that's required, and we're very close to having it all. So we are hoping to bring them into our efforts to actually get a permit to get down into some of this stuff. We do know some of the entrances to it, but specifically I did ask him, can you detect different materials like metals or water levels or like oil or things like that? Because I know that some of these other companies that have actually, people don't know this, but there's other companies that are private contractors that they still protect their intellectual property. They don't release their entire method, but they do have all these proofs of their method. So they're getting these major contracts from oil companies or people who want to see into the ground for different reasons. There's one that's called Geoscan that they're the ones who actually did these scans with Hawara, or the underground labyrinth in Egypt back in 2014, 2015, around then.
What was the name of that complex in Egypt? I'm sorry, Hawara?
Hawara.
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 And then I got to ask Trevor. Well, what happens when they take this same exact technology and use it to scan the underneath of a building or subway system in modern era, which we know exactly what's there? Do the scans, see if they line up, and if the scans are accurate with a subway map or, underground basement levels under, say, like a World Trade Center building, then you know like do they at least have that level of confirmation of demonstrating that their technology works and is robust?
Yeah, they do have, at least to a certain level. Filippo's got like 30 years of experience with SAR and different types of radar, and 30 years of scientific papers out there, which I linked a lot of them in my interview with him. There's a ton of resources in the description of the Biondi protocol. That's the name of my film that came from our friend Mani Seiksade came up with that. We like the title. But there's tons of links to some of his past work in the description there. But closer to home or closer to the present, actually, he showed, there's like 3 or 4 specific examples that are very applicable to the research they've just been doing. Probably the most important is the Gran Sasso Laboratory, which is an underground laboratory about 1,400 meters under this mountain. And they were able to show all the tunnels and all the areas inside this laboratory.
Whoa, wait a second. Back up, Trevor. If they can find underground tunnels and facilities in a mountain for a laboratory, then that means that they could probably, and if they can find structures that were heretofore hidden under the pyramids of Giza, then that means they could probably find deep underground military bases. Like, what if you applied the Biondi protocol to Dulce, New Mexico, or Area 51, or S4, or Wright-Patterson Air, and I could go on, or Cheyenne Mountain, where there apparently really is a Stargate, just like shown in the TV series.
Yes, exactly. And I don't want to put them in any more danger or get more people thinking about this, but you're absolutely correct. This is why we see the international media just completely blacking out on them, not mentioning them at all. This is why we see the Egyptian ministry denying all of this. This is why we see the most powerful people on earth trying to put this down, because, those are the people who are hiding things underground. Yeah, we could see what's under Washington, D.C. or London or the Vatican. We could see Area 51. This is one of the things that really gets shady, and it's like that image you just showed a minute ago of the Sphinx. You can see actually on there that the line goes further than the scan they actually show. Yeah, so you see that left part of the red line that's not being shown above in the scan. You see the scan ends before it gets to the Sphinx. Yep. So with this image, they're subtly telling us that they want to keep living, because this gets very, very dangerous.
So what you're saying is there's a reason why this scan is cut off before it completes the red line, just like it shows everything else, because there might be even more. And a lot of psychics, and I believe Edgar Casey and remote viewers and astral projectors talk about visiting underneath one of the paws of the Sphinx, an entrance to a library or the halls of Amenti or something like that.
Yeah, there's a few remote viewings that I've seen, Ingo Swan, a couple others. But that is where it gets to very sensitive stuff. For example, like William Brown is who I'm working with, along with Richard Gabriel, these 2 friends that have made a couple of miniseries on my channel about the secret underworld of Giza is the big one I'm trying to send a lot of people to, because it covers a lot of this. But he, in 2006, had commissioned the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics, the NRIAG, to do all these GPR scans all over the plateau, which was what really just caught my attention and got me to really become friends with Bill and start working with him.
Now, real quick, Trevor, just a terminology thing. You said GPR scans,
Yeah,
ground
so this,
penetrating radar. Okay,
yeah,
ground penetrating radar scans, which the synthetic aperture radar incorporates ground penetrating radar among other techniques with what AI and imaging
well, the
and
difference
analysis.
is mostly that GPR is actually a ground-based technology. You actually go there with the equipment, you scan it over the ground, and generally, some of the most high-tech would maybe get down to like 50 meters or so, 150 feet, maybe to 200 feet, the most advanced today. So in the final outcome, it's kind of similar. It's basically showing you where voids are, and you have to interpret the data into models. But SAR is quite different in that it's satellite based for one thing, which makes it so you don't need to get on-site permit and access, which is what Dr. Hawass is talking about here. He's coming out saying, nobody asked me. No, I didn't see any radar equipment coming to the plateau. And it's like, nobody said anyone was trying to do that. And to be honest,
let's this is a very touchy subject in the community. My take is, we're from the outside looking in, right? It seems like people have said that there's a lot of amazing artifacts and perhaps suppressed technology that might have been already recovered by the Egyptian authorities from some of these sites. And then it seems like Dr. Zawi Hawass has been kind of pressured to basically go against the more woo and unorthodox findings and basically be the more very meat and potatoes, traditional, Darwinian evolution timeline of things. And, I saw when the Caffrey Research Project, when the Italian team first released all this, and it, for understandable reasons, generated a worldwide furor and hubbub, that Dr. Hawass very quickly came out and he pretty much dissed. I mean, it feels like he just threw a bucket of cold water onto the whole thing. And maybe if you could speak to that, please.
yeah, he's the gatekeeper. He's the key master. He's the man who has the keys to all these locked gates on the plateau. A lot of people in the alternative community really want to blame him for everything, but the truth is he's basically a person who's caught in the focal point of the entire situation. And he's been on the wrong side of a lot of these situations. He's jumped on claims, that were really my friend's discoveries. That hey, Winnie.
Actually, this is one of her puppies. This is Minnie Winnie, or Minnie.
It's Minnie. Hey, Minnie.
Yes, and for our audience out there who are not yet familiar, we have Winnie the Wonder Dog. She's my sidekick, and you'll be seeing her at the conference in Florida this July. Just like you'll see Trevor there as one of our honored and featured guests and exhibitors.
Yeah, I just saw the face super quick. Didn't realize it was someone else. So yeah, he's caught up in this. He's got these big contracts with National Geographic and Smithsonian type groups. Like, we know what they're all tied in with. We know, he's caught up in that whole system. And I think in a lot of cases, he's been personally very angry about them telling him that he can't say things, to be honest. And
I mean, who likes to be muzzled?
Yeah,
nobody. And I'm sure. I mean, for his own reasons, it sounds like he wants to come out and do more, because he said recently, didn't he come to a certain conference and he was saying things that were generally not the meat and potatoes, kind of ho hum line.
Well, I've seen signs, recently more so than in the past. But if you go back to about 1998, I think that's when he signed up for these relationships he got himself involved with, these friends he made, from the start. But that's going back to the 60s, 70s, 70s mostly, but he's had to live with that. But you could see in 1998, specifically when he was just on camera going into the tunnels in the Sphinx, underneath the Sphinx's body, that he and Mark Lehner had just excavated. He's going in there saying, we're finding these tunnels. We're going to show you there are tunnels down here that are going to reveal secrets of the pyramid builders. And he's all excited about it, calling himself Indiana Jones like he always does. But by the end of 1998, he came out and said, nope, there's absolutely nothing under the pyramids. And he didn't have that light in his eyes that he gets excited, and you can see he was clearly lying and upset about having to lie at that point.
It's kind of like the Apollo 11 astronauts. Hey, how was the moon? And they were all really stoked about going. And when they came back, that press conference was anything but.
Their faces were dry. They were like, yeah, we just got back from the moon, sure.
Well, then I want to taking it in the other direction, away from the I'd say the boring and untrue version that were presented. Over in Romania, in the Busegi mountain range there, not only have they found similar types of artifacts or constructions, but they've also found possibly suppressed technologies. And this is at least most recently documented by Radu Cinemar with his Transylvanian Sunrise book series.
Yeah, I've got that one right here. You can see.
I got mine up there too. Yeah.
Yeah, this is book number 1. There's something like 7 or more books, something like that. I've read this one, and book 3 is this one. It's called Mystery of Egypt, and so yeah, these are both the English versions that came out after the Romanian, which were published by Peter Moon, who had been doing these books about Montauk and different subjects that kind of ended up being related to this subject. And yeah, let's get into this a little bit. And let me know if anyone asks questions in the chat. But this is, buy this book, read this book, get this one and book 3 at least if you're interested in Egypt, because basically this one is talking about a record hall underneath. This is the Sphinx in Romania in the Busegi Mountains, and you see below it they're talking about this chamber that was discovered, which had they dated it to about 50 to 55,000 years old, and it had incredible technology inside.
55,000 years old. Now that totally obviously blows away the conventional timeline. And then, I've got a lot of friends who go down in the Mexico area, or they're already down there, and they excavate the Huehuelos type stones. And a lot of these, they, when they're carbon dated, tend to fall in between 3,000 to 18,000 years old. And I thought, 18,000 years already obviously blows away this conventional lamestream timeline. And 18,000 years sounds pretty darn old. But you're saying that complex, they say it may be as old as 55,000 years?
Yeah, and they explain in the book why they come to that conclusion. But basically, it's got a lot of similarities to all these other books I've read that talk about actual experiences with the record halls. One of the most important was by Lobsang Rampa. It's called the Cave of the Ancients, and he's talking about a very similar space in Tibet.
And it's Lobsang Rampa from Tibet, because I was going to say it sounds like a Tibetan monk, a Tibetan name. And then in Tibet, in the Himalayas, they're known for having the inner earth entrance to, is it Shambhala or Shangri-La? I forget which one.
Maybe they're kind of the same idea, or Agartha, the Hyperborea.
Or Agartha, that might have been it as well.
Yeah, well, this book also very much gets into, there's mentions of entrances deep into the interior of the earth, basically, but it's talking about how this is some of the most withheld information from this whole story, which is all very, very sensitive stuff. Yeah, I can get a little bit into what's there. I have there's a couple pictures I could kind of show of like the chamber.
Okay, so this is right. The chambers when inside of the Buseji mountain range. If
Yeah,
you were to go into it, those are the tunnels, and then to get into this large, huge cavern, and then within that large cavern, that's where they were finding these super advanced technology containing records, or that would be like a living type of library or a holographic type
yeah.
situation.
There's so much to this story as far as validating that this is real, but basically Radu Cinemar is describing this in the first person. He's studying under this guy Cesar, who's this kind of enlightened master, very interesting character. And then there's this whole part of the story that relates to these super high level elite Freemasons who meet with him and have this whole kind of mental battle with each other and intellectual discourse where he's basically this guy's basically forced to work with them and get through this threshold or an energetic barrier that they couldn't get through themselves. And so there's all this more stuff to go to the story, but when they get in there, basically Radu Cinemar is describing it in first person, going in there and seeing this technology, which I'll give an overview of because it's mind-blowing, and maybe even read a couple passages. I have some things bookmarked, but basically the whole thing and even the tunnel leading into this chamber were completely buried inside the mountain. And the only reason anyone knew it was there was because the Pentagon had scanned this area, and the Pentagon had scanned Iraq as well, and they found this energy signature nearby Baghdad, and they,
That was one of the reported Stargates.
yeah, I think it's basically the truth about the story. We've kind of seen rumors that Saddam had a Stargate. Maybe it was this one that was found in Egypt, which was, I think, basically a true story. That part, at least, of the film, where they're talking about one being found in the 20s in Egypt. I don't know if it's the same one exactly or how exactly how much was true, but yeah, they found the energy signature near Baghdad, and this is basically throughout the story you end up understanding this is why Bush invaded. This is why we sent the military. They took over the museum and this underground location, but it had an energy barrier that none of them could get through, and so it just sat there basically. And they ended up detecting this exact same frequency and energy signature by satellite underneath the Romanian Sphinx. And so that's what started this whole thing. They were able to detect that it was there, but there is no entrance. They ended up having to use this crazy technology to drill through the mountain just to reach the tunnel to get into it. And then they had to cross these energy barriers. And so it was heavily protected. And very interesting that they're basically describing that it was elite level Freemasons within the Pentagon, alerting some of their top people in Europe and things like that. And so less than the U.S. military being continuously informed on the situation, it kind of went into these occult groups that were trying to just get in there on their own. So very, very interesting material related to that in this book as well. But when you get into what was actually in the chamber, I'll see if I can show some pictures as I describe this a little. But
and then Trevor, so we're kind of surmising here through this, because that's why we're having this discussion, is that perhaps the similar types of technology being found in the Buseji range in that complex with this energy shield barrier that and secret societies involved and the derp state types. That might also be the situation perhaps under the pyramids there, and then probably under the Sphinx, perhaps, maybe.
definitely very much related. And yeah, I can explain a little bit about what's in Romania, but what was in the back of this chamber also was there was 3 tunnels leading out from this. They call it the projection chamber because there was actually holographic projection technology in there. that I will describe in a second. But these 3 tunnels in the back, this middle one, they said, actually leads to inner Earth, where space is deep in the interior of the planet. It's about all they say about it. And then the tunnel on the right went all the way to Tibet from Romania. And the tunnel
from Romania. Okay. So I know in the while we film, we're going to be recording these live like we are now on Tuesdays. We're going to have our Friday, kind of edited version. And I'm sure we're going to have the graphic in there because that is quite a distance. And then that also links up with everyone's testimonies in our community about the tunnel system, linking the deep underground military bases and certain inner earth places. And folks in our community like John Whitberg, who wrote it's a testimony series. It's not science fiction, Castle of Glass. He's now working on volume 4. He speaks to how the underground tunnel system was with a maglev system was done by Roundtree International. And so we even know the names of some of the corporations who are producing this technology that they've had for decades and have been hiding from us. So one tunnel went deep into the earth. One tunnel was running from the Buseji Range in Romania underground all the way to Tibet. And then what was the third tunnel, Trevor?
Okay, here's a picture of the chamber. It's a round dome, and you can see in the back. The third one actually goes all the way to Egypt, or it goes to Baghdad, and then from there all the way to Giza is what they're describing. So, and then you can see there's all these tables that were set up around the outside of the room, and this structure in the middle. A couple other things like in the corners, and then these 3 tunnels in the back. So this is what they're saying the chamber looked like. And when he walks into this chamber, he goes up to some of these tables. And for one thing, all of this stuff in the room is set up for people who are 12 feet tall, 10 feet tall. Giants. Anunnaki, essentially. Anunnaki genetic engineering base, medical base, laboratory. These tables, he describes walking up to him. He has to like step up on these stairs just to get up to the level of the surface of the tables. And there's this strange writing on some of them. But basically, when you touch them or interact with them, they turned on, and these holographic projections came out of the surface of the table. And they were all different kinds of things. One of them he went up to, and when he interacted with it, it showed a human body as a holographic projection. And he realized he could zoom in to inside the body and see inside of it. And then he actually noticed these birthmarks or something. He realized he was looking at his own body. He was looking at his own body, and he could zoom down to the cellular level or to the atomic level of his own body and look inside of it. This is what he described.
Well, that's consistent with medical bed technology, which is apparently Palladian technology. That's one of the highest versions of it, where they combine quantum computing, AI, holography, and genetics. So they scan your genetic makeup and then holographically projects a morphogenetic image out, that you can then interact with. And then I know that JP he's a super soldier whistleblower or an experiencer whistleblower, who's appeared on shows like Dr. Michael Sala's exopolitics.org. And he's speaking to these space arcs, which may be hidden all over the planet and also have a lot of relationship to the inner earth, inner earth world. And this is all, as woo as it is for our audience and, you and I, and to some extent, it's all consistent, this testimony around the world, whether Egypt, Romania, pyramids in China, Tibet. And unfortunately, it's an environment where we really do need full disclosure, because then there isn't so much suppression and limited hangout or secret societies behind the scenes trying to block everything off, get in, steal everything, and then open it up, maybe. And we've seen so much of that. You mentioned the Smithsonian earlier at the beginning of this show. So
which is a Masonic owned organization. It was founded by Smithson. The guy was, and National Geographic was bought by Rupert Murdoch.
Rupert Murdoch.
Years ago, he's a Freemason. It's like, these are facts. United Nations is basically owned by the Freemasons, and their UNESCO is a major reason a lot of this stuff gets different. UNESCO is one of the big ones.
Yeah, the World Heritage sites and all of that. And then if you want to hide a deep underground military base at a beautiful sacred site, then you just declare it a World Heritage site, and there you go.
It backfires too when they call it a World Heritage site, like Chichen Itza. Once it got labeled the UNESCO Heritage, then the tourists just flocked to it and got trashed. And sometimes people think they're supposed to be protecting the sites. They're really doing the opposite.
So you're saying that once the site becomes UNESCO, on paper it's theoretically protected and maybe things are happening behind the scenes, but then you also have the whole world, they want to flock to it because that's a prestigious label, at least out there. So then
the owners of the plateau as well. But I was gonna finish explaining a little more of what's in that chamber, unless you have any questions.
No, actually, please go ahead. Please. I want to cut you off there.
Yeah, there's a bit more to say about that chamber, because that's not all that was in there, but you're also on the right track with genetic engineering, because one of these tables, it was like he could interact with it and pull up, he could choose like a monkey and a fish and put them together on a table, and it would show him a hybrid species. Like, okay, how about we try this one and that one? And, you got man, bear, pig.
And that's what they did in Atlantis, apparently. And that's where we got the Pegasus, or Pegasuses, or Pegasi, however you want to say it, which Project Pegasus features very prominently in the secret space programs. The Minotaur, the Centaur, those beings apparently did come from the days of Atlantis, and were not natural. They weren't necessarily meant to be combined, but with that kind of technology, perhaps it was possible.
Yeah, there's a lot I can't say for sure. Obviously, I wasn't there, or maybe I was, but that was a different incarnation. But there's a lot of legends, at least, saying that in these wars, when the Atlanteans kind of turned dark, and some of the members of leadership started using this technology wrong, this was one of the things that was violating nature, creating armies that were half man, half lion, and devour their enemies on the battlefield, things like that. But
well, I want to give a shout out because we have Jessica, the cryptid huntress, in the audience, and she's big on dogman and werewolves, and that's that in the super soldier programs there's things known as the dogman breeding programs. So this is consistent. What was old is new and is old again.
Yeah, exactly. There's some programs I'm seeing, sometimes some photographs coming out that are really disturbing. Like they're trying to mix a human with a pig or something. And it's like, this is exactly what got the Atlanteans wiped from the planet.
To everyone out there who loves pork and bacon, apparently pigs are a combination of humans and sows or some other related thing. And just like cats, apparently the reason why they have the slit eye is they have some reptilian in them, and that's what distinguishes them, or one distinguishing feature from the other felines.
So I've got a lot of evidence in my book series, which I'm finally getting ready to put out volume 1 of, but it's been 20 years.
What's it called? What's the name of your series?
The first one is just going to be about Egypt. I think that's going to be called, working title right now is The Grand Riddle of Egypt, something like that. I ended up splitting the first volume into 2. The whole thing's like 5 or 6, 7 volumes now. But
Trevor, you have a lot of knowledge, and so I know it would be hard to try to fit it into one book. 7
Oh, it's
Wow.
just one book. Now it's over 3,000 pages, and it's
Yeah,
been
3,000.
every year it gets more and more information get packed into it, and I'm like, okay, I've got to split it. Last year it's like volume one was covering Egypt and all these sites around the world that I've traveled to. It's other pyramid cultures and stuff. Now I had to put all that stuff into a volume two just to fit in everything that's happening now at Giza and Egypt.
But
So
where have you been, Trevor? I know. So you've been. Where have you said? Really, would you say you've cut most of your chops in archaeology? Would it be mostly in Egypt, or are there any other sites that you personally have done field research in?
I've been to Central and South America, North America, and Europe, Greece and Rome.
So Greece and Rome, beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, basically just Egypt. Maybe a dozen countries I've been to, and I haven't been to Asia yet, unfortunately, but soon enough, I hope. I'd like to get to Romania soon. I'd like to get to a lot of these sites. Australia, that's another one. That's
well, the Buseji site isn't exactly open to the public, right? That isn't it closely guarded and a secret where exactly it is, or
kind of. There's, I think, some restrictions there. They don't want people poking around much, but I think you can walk out to it, and yeah, you can get there. I know some friends have been there. Robert Schock even went there at one point, geologist. But yeah, I could get there, and I don't know about getting underground, but we can see what we can do. It's something
maybe if you can pass through the shield, they let you through, but then they just wait for you to come out so they can military abduct you.
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, it's very interesting how they're letting this stuff come out, and that they let Radu publish this book series. And I've been looking into him quite a bit and trying to. I've recently made some interesting progress learning about him, and kind of realized why he's so difficult to find and track down. But I've got some new leads on it that are pretty exciting, because it's a very important story I'm pursuing.
So you're saying that Radu Sinamar himself is hard to reach these days?
Yeah, nearly impossible. And there are reasons for that. But as this story unfolded, the Vatican got involved, the U.S. presidency, Bush was involved, the president at the time. And obviously the Freemasons and other groups were all very, very interested in this. Surprisingly, actually, it says the Pope was not completely against, releasing it, but basically a lot of groups put a lot of pressure on the Romanian government not to release it yet. Or to
was that Pope John Paul II or Pope Ratzinger? Ratzinger
at that time, maybe. I'm going to say probably. I can't remember, but it was surprising that the Pope actually did say, we're not actually completely opposed to you putting this out, but we suggest taking it slow and thinking about this, how it comes out, and actually said, we have documents in our archives that actually verify this. The Pope said that. Yeah. So.
That was not broadcast over international news at all. They kept that quiet.
No. And there's other signs that you can look at and see, okay, well, this story must be true, or something like that was happening, because like Romania was inducted into NATO at that point, which was probably a perk for them cooperating with international interests, or they got accepted for that reason, or things that we can see in the geopolitical news that happened at that time align with what they're saying is going on.
Right, because there's a surface politics and formations of with NATO and the European Union, but then there's the behind the scenes stuff. Like most people think the Iraq wars were over oil, and many of us in the community believe, well, yeah, oil, and Stargates and Anunnaki technology, and that seems to be the exact same pattern that you're speaking to here, Trevor.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was actually one section, I might be able to find it quick, but yeah, I mean, everything about what was going on there. Well, actually, yeah, never mind that. It's going to be hard to find these, but I'll show you some specific quotes that are very interesting about it. But It's interesting that in Romania also, this area of the Bachiji Mountains is actually called Babel, like Babylon in, Iraq. So it's absolutely 100% related to that other site in Baghdad. And when they actually accessed this barrier, this energy barrier, he passed through it and opened it up.
So Baghdad had an energy barrier as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so they both had energy barriers, because I know that featured prominently at the Buseji Range complex. I don't know any information really about what they found in Iraq, but that's really interesting. That same type of barrier technology was there. And let me ask, did they do some kind of rituals or something, or to increase their vibration, or to contact it? What did they do to get past this barrier, or these barriers?
Well, let me read this section to you quick, just this quote. But before I do, I'll say that it was this guy, Cesar, who ended up having the proper frequency or understanding to actually open.
Okay, exactly. So they had to have a human with a proper DNA or frequency go through. It let them through. And then after they went through, then the barrier came down.
Yeah, after he went through, he was able to turn it off from the other side so the rest could come through.
And this sounds similar to, I believe, some of the testimony of JP speaking out, visiting these space arcs buried around the planet, where he's visiting with these secret space program types.
My favorite being when the Mayans that were with them just walked right through the portal in front of them, and then I think it was Chinese and American troops couldn't get through because they weren't, chanting the right password or had the right genetics. And these Mayans are getting all excited and walk right through the portal. That was awesome.
And they were happy and they were singing and crying. Definitely high vibration.
Reading on the walls that Quetzalcoatl was returning or waking up or something. They're like, oh yes. And then these troops that had the wrong stuff couldn't go through. They described it like they were pushing against something was resisting them, like rubber or something. Invisibly, they couldn't walk further. But let me read you this quote here. This is from the first one. He says, "You remember that the Venerable One told me about the discovery that they had made next to Baghdad, that there as well was an energetic barrier that couldn't be breached, but was identical with the semi-spherical shield that surrounded the big hall from there." Redu says he nods and says yes. And Cesar continues, "Well, the American counselor on national security issues got an ultra-secret fax in which he was informed that the energetic field from Baghdad had suddenly activated and started pulsing at a great frequency. This is when they opened the one in Romania, the Baghdad one turned on." And he goes,
and that's consistent with these testimonies of these space arcs are all interlinked and related. And it's almost like as humanity achieves a certain vibration, or people with certain genetics are coming to the forefront, then we're able to access these sites. And it's key to the larger awakening and ascension of humanity, which factors in bigly with the full disclosure movement and knowing the truth, which is how we began this discussion. Is if we don't know the truth, then we're never able to live at a higher vibration. It's a lower vibration if you're living a lie. And then from there, by living enough of the truth, that enables the more benevolent ET types to make contact without violating the prime directive.
Yeah. Let me finish this one too. He says, the amazing information was that a hologram appeared in front of it. This is in Baghdad when they opened the Romanian one. The Baghdad one, hologram appeared in front of it, gradually showing Europe, then the southeast of Europe, then Romania's territory, then the Bachiji Mountains, and finally the location of the inner structure within the Great Gallery's corridor in a semi-spherical energetic shield that was strongly pulsing. It was obvious that the two energetic semi-spherical shields were directly but mysteriously connected, and that the activation of one led them to the activation of the other. Who knows, maybe there is a network of these kinds of underground structures all over the world. And he says the bad news was that U.S. presidency was informed of these events. He's talking about Bush, and made diplomatic contact with Romania through the secret services. And so he starts talking about how this whole operation Bush picked up on it at that time, and then they were like, oh, great, yeah.
So we know from members of our community, in particular Christy Campbell, and I believe Arkeem Ra to some extent, and even maybe James Rink as well, but definitely Christy Campbell. She testifies to being an MK Ultra, child slave soldier she had an altar who was gifted to George Bush Sr. And George Bush Sr., through Skull and Bones and many occult contacts, is involved in the secret space, or was involved in the secret space programs, in addition to negative goings on at the Mothers of Darkness Castle, Le Chateau Amarat in Belgium, which is infamous. And so here he is, getting the word about this amazing technology on probably, I believe, Anunnaki technology in Romania, linked to the Iraq technology, which the U.S. had already rampaged and taken through Iraq by that time. So it makes perfect sense that, if this came to light, that there was related technology in Romania at the time that available, that George Bush Sr. would be all over that as president of the U.S. in the 80s.
Yeah. And, this is why he was setting up this
90s, early 90s, sorry.
Yeah. That's why he was setting up the war for his son later. And he already, he knew that there was stuff like that. I'm positive. But his, when Bush Jr. got invaded, they locked this site down, but it wasn't until this guy opened the one in Romania that, the U.S. troops guarding that threshold ended up seeing this hologram pop out and show them what was going on in Romania at that time. So then that's when Bush finally figured out, he already knew the thing was there, but hadn't seen it on yet.
So that's how they made the link. It was because there was also this holographic view at the Busegi site showing in live time what was happening at its sister Iraqi site.
Yeah, and like I said before, there was a tunnel between those two sites as well. But this was an instant, like they were looking from there together. And yeah, Bush probably knew some things about it. He probably already knew from the Pentagon that there was a sister site of the exact same frequency of this energy that they had detected there, because that was from the Pentagon as well. But he was probably not filled in on what was actually going on there himself. His troops saw it through the kind of thing. So very interesting. And some of the other objects that they had found in the chamber under the Romanian Sphinx also very clearly pointed to the Anunnaki, basically, to 10-foot tall beings. There was a chair in the middle of the room, which was very, very interesting technology that he's describing. You sit down in it, but it's designed for a giant person. But in the third book, when they actually go through this tunnel all the way to the chamber in Egypt, they talk about what is in Egypt underneath the Giza Plateau as the exact same type of chair, but it's designed for a normal-sized human. And so he describes what this chair was for is very interesting. When you sit down in it, it kind of accentuates your own psychic abilities. There are like crystals involved that line up with your spine and your chakras, and it kind of gives you the ability, if you have some level of clairvoyance or conscious development, you can actually accentuate that or amplify it to a point where it's kind of like a time machine or a thought amplification device.
Well, I got to interrupt you, Trevor. That sounds quite a bit like the infamous Montauk trip chair.
Yeah, you're going to see now that this is how it starts to cross over to that, because not like this chair is going to send you back in time, but your consciousness can be projected back in time. And you can observe these things that are going on there. So he talks about that a bit in the first book, but then you get into this one. And maybe I'll describe a little of what's going on here too, because there were some other things in the Romanian chamber as well that are pretty interesting. But when you get to the Egyptian one, basically they are talking about traveling all the way from Romania to Egypt in this tunnel. They had this special little military cart thing that zipped through the tunnel. And they say that this chamber underneath the Giza Plateau, there's no access to it there. Like the only way into that chamber is from Baghdad, technically, because that's before Romania.
I have to tell you, it sounds like a crazy Legend of Zelda map type thing, where there's no way you're getting into it unless you find the exact right portal doorway to get there. Otherwise, it's a lot of crazy digging.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me see if
so what did they find on the other side, buried way inaccessible, otherwise inaccessible under the Giza plateau with their little bot?
A couple quotes of that because I think hearing his language about it is kind of useful, not to be boring just reading. But I don't know. Here's one part. When they first get into that chamber, he's saying, actually, that part of the room was imposing even from the very beginning because it had a massive superimposed ensemble like a library with many shelves, which stretched out on the left and on the back walls of the room. When I went near, I noticed that, in fact, those shelves were carved directly into the stone walls, and they were very well polished. The height of each shelf did not exceed 15 centimeters, but each shelf stretched out on the entire wall and had 5 compartments, each separated by a wire stone column. But what attracted me straight away was the content of those shelves. I saw there thousands, maybe tens of thousands, of metal tablets arranged in perfect order at a distance of no more than 1 centimeter between them. The first impression was that of a huge library, but I immediately noticed that, in fact, the tablets contained no inscriptions, and they were so even that they almost reflected an image like a mirror. And he said, I saw that, unlike me, the American officer was pulling the metal tablets straight to the outside, thus making it slide easily. Here he describes it like he tried pulling these tablets out of the wall, and they wouldn't come out unless you slid them in a certain way. And then when they did, if you tried to put one tablet back into the wrong slot, it would be like magnetically repelled. You couldn't put it back into the wrong slot, so they would always have to be in order. And he describes it.
I know lots of librarians and public schools everywhere would love that feature.
Yeah, that would be great. That's the ultimate Dewey Decimal System right there.
Yep.
But yeah, it was like on the lower side, which slid out from the slot where it was placed. It had 2 thin parallel slits that were only distinctive sign on the tablets. There weren't any writings on the tablets, but he asked about this, and basically there's a certain way of like pushing on the tablets where they popped up these holographic movies, basically, and there were like days-long recordings, which were records and histories of entire other galaxies. It was like a library of the whole universe, is how they describe it. And then there is other things in this chamber as well. It is where he says, I was so curious. I tried to put the tablet in a free slot on a shelf, but it acted as if 2 magnets with the same pole were brought together. The slot rejected the tablet.
Mm-hmm.
Then I placed it in several other slots, but it was impossible until I tried it again with the slot in which I removed it. It fitted and stabilized immediately. Then it talks about how they have these like little holographic projections of the history of various galaxies.
And this is what they found in the Giza location, or is it still at the? So this is what they found after they went from Busegi through one of the 3 tunnels within the giant underground complex that had been before that shielded. And when they went through tunnel number 3, they ended up in that spot underneath the Giza plateau. And then these records, I'm wondering if they're related to what's supposedly accessible from the paw of the Sphinx.
Yeah, this is an image of that room, and you can see there's 2 walls of the library. All of these tiny, he's saying they're 15 centimeters or less, pretty small little tablets, but line 2 whole walls of this chamber. And then you see a couple other things here. Right here, you see this is like basically a 2-eye stone is what they used to call it. It's a crystal that's powering some of the things in this room, basically. And yeah, and then there's 2 other things, this chair in the middle and this right here. I'll talk about both of those. Are pretty interesting as well, because the chair in the middle is basically, like I said, the same thing as what was in Romania, but it was designed for a normal sized human. And yeah, that's kind of a slightly more, might take a couple minutes to explain, but Cesar, this guy who was kind of a ascended, enlightened sort of being, sat down in the chair and gave it some test runs and started telling Radu, yeah, we're figuring this out. This was basically, it's like an Akashic record reader. It's like it can help you to be able to project, because you can do this on your own if you reach that level, like Edgar Casey. But this is a device that's actually technology designed to amplify your own psychic abilities. So Cesar, he sits down in this thing, and then later he's talking about basically, he's talking about going back to sit with Jesus and like listen to Jesus' teachings firsthand, and all this stuff. Like the projections showed the dusk shortly after Jesus was removed from the cross. He's talking about being there at the crucifixion and seeing this crazy storm happen after, and witnessing him just like giving these talks, to the public, Sermon on the Mount type of stuff. And this is a good quote too. He's talking about Mary Magdalene. I'll just read quick. He says, when I first saw Jesus among his disciples on that hill, one of the 3 women was near him. She had a special personality and glow. She was the youngest and most beautiful of them. I intuitively knew that she was the one called Mary Magdalene in the Gospels. And at the same time, I've realized that among the subtle threads of causal links, there is a very profound connection between her and Christ. I've also perceived the fact that some of the disciples were not completely in agreement with the relationship because they somehow felt left aside, just like the Gnostic Gospel tells. Only 2 of them didn't share that opinion, which undoubtedly came from a vain perception of reality. From other projections or Akashic rewinds, I've had the chance to find out that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were together almost all the time. Only when Christ spoke to the crowds or to people in private were they not together. But in the evening, I often saw them withdraw alone, just the 2 of them. Usually she was the first to receive the initiation from him, and I was amazed to see that both the disciples and many of his followers practiced certain methods of purification and preservation of bodily health, especially on river shores where they had water at their disposal. I often saw Mary Magdalene guiding the people in these simple methods, and many came to ask her for help when Jesus was busy with others.
I've heard from other places she was his closest disciple, and this is consistent with that.
This is what the Gnostic Gospels said. They were together. They were a very holy, sacred.
Well, we were speaking at the Freemasons, and apparently the reason why the Ethiopian Bible has 88 books, the apocryphal texts, versus the King James version, for example. King James being a 33rd degree Freemason demonologist. Is that the Freemasons hadn't been able to conquer that region of North Africa before, in time to suppress the 12 books or so that were left out. And that's why you've got 88 in the Ethiopian Bible, and I think 66 in the King James and other versions.
Yeah, the Ethiopian one is actually the only one on Earth that still has the Book of Enoch. So very important. Yeah, all these other ones had censored it. As in Alexandria, where all the first beginnings of Christianity were gathering, and there you had kind of 3 different groups. You had the original Egyptian religion, and then you had the Gnostic Christians that were really closer to Jesus' actual teachings, and then you had these more militant or conservative type of Christians that really just wanted to make the message.
Is that the Coptics? Is that like more the Coptic sect?
I think the Coptics are probably closer to the Gnostics. The Gnostics and the Egyptians, they kind of got along because Jesus' teachings were perfectly harmonious with the Hermetic teachings.
And apparently Egypt, Christ may have gone to Egypt, the Middle East, because he asked his father to take him where the three wise men had come from, and they came from the East, including possibly Asia as well.
Yeah, I feel very, very confident that he spent a lot of his missing years, they say, between his youth and when the Bible doesn't talk about all these years between. Yeah, he was in Egypt. I think he went to India as well. But I think he spent a lot of time in Egypt learning from the Essenian, priests. That he was an Essene, and that was a very pure, pristine kind of Judaic sect that was a mystery school, essentially guided by these ascended masters, or it was an actual school designed to help enlighten people. And they had these healing priests that would travel the land, grow their hair long, and heal people without charging money. And they were called the therapeutes, or other names they had for them. Nazorian, actually. Nazar, the root of that word that people say is from Nazarene. It's not really, I don't think it's really talking about Nazareth. It's talking about this term that was given to these wandering priests, basically. So yeah, it ties in with that, and I think the Essenes were also the ones bringing the Ark of the Covenant, down probably to Ethiopia or through Egypt, or protecting it. And all of this ties straight back to the Coptics are still there in Egypt today, and they've got a lot of the secrets. The monasteries they're on top of a lot of this underground stuff, protecting, and they hold a lot of that knowledge, just like the Sufis. The Sufis have so much of it, and everyone thinks the Sufi temples and the mosques are of the Muslim age, so they don't assume that there's stuff underneath some of these mosques that's actually going back to many thousands of years. But the Sufis are very, very careful and protective of this knowledge. You can be in these probationary periods for half your life, just working to prove that you're worthy of learning certain things. So the Sufis that, you've got Jewish history, Christian and Muslim, all in Egypt. And all of them are really going all the way back to Akhenaten, because he was the original, he was kind of setting the stage for monotheism to come.
So you're talking the pharaoh Akhenaten?
Yeah.
And around what BC period was he?
He was 18th dynasties. This is like roughly like 1500 BC-ish. So yeah, this was the Amarna period, which was very, very important part of Egyptian history, where he was known as the heretic king, because he came in and said, this is all wrong. We're going to, restore it to the truth. And very much like a Jesus type of character who came in and said, flipped over the money tables of, in the temples, and called out all this corruption, basically, from the Amun priesthood that was empowered at that time. And they started adopting all this kind of black magic, kind of darker stuff. And he came in and said, no, we're going to redo this. We're going to create one Egypt that's united. We're going to recognize the one creative source of the universe, the Aten. And he basically...
So he kicked off a golden era from them, after a long period of decline of those dynasties up to then?
Yeah, well, a short-lived one, because they ended up just killing him and taking back over, and even his son Tutankhamun tried to really stay loyal to him and to the Aten religion rather than the Amun priesthood, but they killed him too, or made sure he didn't last too long. This is why he died as a boy, and then they took back the control of that time. But I think Tutankhamun, whose real name was Tutankhaten, he still had the Aten on his name rather than Tun. But he let them change his name back. But if you see his throne in his tomb, it still says Tutankhaten. He still kept his father's religion in his name. And I think he and Nefertiti both did a lot of work to preserve the story of Akhenaten, the true story. I think it is buried and written under the Sphinx and in other record chambers around the world, because it is so important. It is basically the origin of monotheism on our planet. And so, he really changed things, and then they flipped it back. But he actually, in doing what he did, laid the groundwork for Joseph and Moses and Jesus and all these prophets that come later within monotheism. It was a continuation of part of the mission he started. Every single one of them faced, the opposition of translation, these dogmatic religions built their names. But I think
something's bumping, Trevor. Is there something bumping? I'm sorry, we got washed out. I don't know if you're bumping the microphone or desk. What were you saying about the last part about this? Basically, Pharaoh Akhenaten was the original source from at least up to now contemporary history for monotheism, whereas before that you've got like the more Amun priesthood where they're doing more like along human sacrifice and much darker types of occult magic.
Yeah, and I mean, knowledge of it's different ways of expressing the same thing. Like the netters of Egypt are names for the forces of nature. You could call those powers of God or something like that. Maybe still believe there's some central Godhead at the top in some sense. And these ideas trickle down, say, into the Kabbalah as the spheres on the tree of life, or the different aspects of the forces of creation that sustain reality. Or into Christianity with like the angels, let's say, being the powers of God, or the fruits of the Spirit, maybe, or some of those different aspects of the natural world that guide the course of the constant creation of our world. But you can also kind of wrap all of those into a bundle of these are all different functions or aspects of God, if you want to call it that. But Akhenaten was the first one to say that there is this central source to everything. It just kind of set the stage for a lot of what would come later. Not the religions, but the prophets, or the inspired actual messages of Yeshua, Jesus. And I think he was also called Isa when he was in the Far East, was another name for Jesus. But the importance of Akhenaten can't be overstated. Absolutely.
Well, I want to ask you, where do you think things are going right now? Do you think the next steps are getting permits to actually from the Egyptian government to officially be able to archaeologically explore that region, and and then maybe link it up to these other sites, like what's being found in Iraq and Romania?
Yeah, I think eventually it's going to have to happen. And I don't know how, our friends in Italy, they're going to be scanning the Giza Plateau this whole year. They're going to keep getting more and more information on that. And then they're having another press conference in December. They just mentioned in my interview, they said. So by December, we're going to get a whole other kind of, a lot more information about the plateau. Maybe we'll see some of these tunnels leading out from there, but I think what we'll end up seeing eventually, at least, is that most all of Cairo has tunnels under it, and they're going every which way, and it's a huge, huge spider web. It's going to look like a giant network, and there will be tunnels going all the way down to Sudan, all the way over to Libya, all the way to Iraq.
Now, let me ask this. Let's say you're going to access one of these tunnels that goes all the way to Libya, right? From the Giza Plateau. Are these, like, I know from testimonies, and it seems like these earthquake maps around the world, that a lot of these tunnels and underground military bases might be at about 6 kilometers or 6 miles deep, something about that. Maybe it's 10 kilometers or 6 miles deep. I think that's about right. And would you say that these tunnels are that deep, or you don't have to go quite that deep to access, say, the tunnel from Egypt to Libya from the pyramids there?
I don't remember exactly what they said about the depth there, but I think there's some that go extremely deep. I think most of the ones would be within the range that we could scan. Filippo said his maximum depth is actually about 5 kilometers, but it depends on the conditions if we can get that deep.
So that's for detection. So he's saying like the accurate detection is up to about 5 kilometers, but you could maybe stretch it a little bit past that.
Yeah, I think that's about the max in perfect conditions. So, but he's talking about, for instance, scanning Mars, and the atmosphere is less dense, so he might be able to, go deeper than that on the surface of Mars. It depends if there's moisture in the ground or different aspects like that.
But then does that mean he has to get access to some kind of a satellite around Mars? Is that like open source, or he can apply for that as an academia?
Yeah, it might require a new satellite for that. What he's using on Earth are the satellites from Umbra and Capella Space, these 2 different companies that do the SAR scanning, and then they give anyone for free the information, the data. So all they did was take that free satellite information on Earth and the software that was allowed to.
So this is all open source and free? You mean you're saying you basically anyone before, could have basically gotten together this information, compiled it, and then, wow. I hope I want to get the link to that to share with our viewers. That sounds amazing. And I'm sure a lot of people are interested in some of these more questionable sites. And I'm just wondering if that data is accessible or if it's been gatekept.
The data is totally accessible to anyone. The trick is, the key to using it is Filippo's software, which he's in the process of patenting now. So if you've got Filippo's software, yeah, anyone on Earth could use the data from those 2 companies that is available for free to look anywhere.
Wow, that's some valuable software. I'm sure a lot of the oil and gas and gold miners and explorers and hydrothermal people, anyone would love that. Just the industrial applications alone are mind-blowing. And then off of that, maybe that would get Biondi and the rest of the team the type of funding that they need to independently pursue their research and grease the palms that need to be greased, perhaps, maybe.
Yeah,
in places.
Maybe they could do these contracted jobs to make money to do more archaeological projects, which is their passion for it. But that's what I told Biondi. I asked him about that, and he did explain, yes, there are so many other applications in terms of mining, oil, infrastructure monitoring, making sure foundations and buildings are safe, saving lives.
Oh, that's amazing. That would be, yeah, I didn't think about that one. That's a great one. Checking out the bridges, they need some help too.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, sounds like $1 trillion patent to me, and I hope it is for you. And he laughed and he was appreciative.
I got to ask, have you ever said, hey, Filippo or, the others, have you ever thought about seeing if they'd bring you onto their team or after maybe things settle down or they're doing their own thing and you want to pursue your own lines of research?
Well, they are bringing us in. We're going to be working together. It's basically confirmed that in the future our 2 projects are going to join, me and Phil and Richard and them. But I do want to actually say, because I didn't say it in the interview with them or clarify, that when I say this is $1 trillion patent, if he wanted to sell it to DARPA or the Pentagon, he probably could get $1 trillion for it, and the American taxpayers probably wouldn't even notice. They're taking trillions every day. But that's not what they're doing with it. What they're choosing to do with it is actually the most noble thing they could possibly do, which is scanning underneath the Giza Plateau, which I believe is the greatest thing anyone could do for the world, for the planet, for humanity. Which is why that's their motto, for all mankind. And, we were joking about it too. And they're like, Filippo's like, not just for all mankind, for all Mars kind too, and Martians. And I'm like, okay, yes. Not just for Earth, but
so Filippo, he's hip to the secret space programs and the Mars Defense Force and the native species up there.
I asked them that directly. I said, what do you think about the extraterrestrial factor, involvement, even potential of any of that? How has that affected the work? Have people tried to delegitimize your project based on that? which I have seen people doing, and it's like, guys, that's not working. You're actually the minority here. Everyone knows there's ET on this planet. You know, if you're still asking, like, are we alone? You're embarrassing yourself.
So
You know?
people are realizing the emperor has no clothes.
Exactly. And he's, you know, their answer to that was, again, very scientific. Like, you know, we don't know for sure, but they were the ones who brought up Mars, not me. And we're talking about the monuments on Mars. I put a bunch of images of it showing the pyramids, the face, and very, very interesting images, like from my friend Wayne Herschel. I put some of his images in. Where you can see that they're actually laid out as star maps, the pyramids on Mars.
Oh yeah, exactly. Just like here on Earth, with the pyramids of Giza lined up with the Orion complex, and then I'm told that that's lined up with like the Anunnaki underneath the reptilian Orion, Siakar Empire, which apparently is no longer. It's fractured and splintered. But then, from a movement perspective, I wanted to ask you, Trevor, has the team ever recruited remote viewers and psychics and astral projectors and channelers, Akashic record keepers and basically everyone with all these different modalities to try to throw that at looking at what's underneath the pyramids?
Well, that brings me to one other thing I want to say from the Romanian story as well. But I'll say first that Corrado Malanga, he's very open about his belief in ETs and what he thinks about it, interdimensional kind of beings. He's got no filter. He's completely honest. He'll say what he means about it, and that's why some people were trying to bring negative attention to them because of that. It's like, there is ET involvement in this, folks. If you can't tell by seeing the 700-meter structure, even if it's not exactly how their models perfectly, it's still a 700-meter structure there. You can see these 90-degree angles and straight lines down that depth. You can see it in the scans themselves, not just the models. So.
Yeah, it blows away the lamestream model of history so badly that there's no recovering from that. And yeah.
I'll tell you what came from this book too was okay. Let me tell you a little bit more about this chamber under Giza. Once they got there, I have a couple highlighted things here, but this means that one way or another they found out about. Okay, the guy says this is one of the other guys that's with them in the chamber down there. He's one of the military representatives or Masonic representative or something, and he says, first of all, it's obvious that the tunnel was dug with a clear intention of getting here. Okay, this is because the one guy found this tunnel from the Great Pyramid through a hidden entrance in the Great Pyramid. There's a tunnel that comes down as if on a beeline straight towards this chamber. So somebody knew it was there and started tunneling down from the Great Pyramid towards it. And then at a certain point, they actually turned off to the side. You can kind of see it here. The tunnel comes from the Great Pyramid and then it angles off away from the direct course towards the chamber. And one of the guys in the party they were with, exploring it, he's saying this. First of all, it's obvious that the tunnel was dug with a clear intention of getting here into the chamber. This means that one way or another they found out about the occult chamber and forced their way to it. The question is, how could they know about the existence of this place? What means did they use? I, for example, with the technology I currently have access to, can't discover this underground cavity if I'm at ground level. After all, we are almost 260 meters underground. Okay, but let's say this is not the main issue. We can't discover this construction because it is protected by a special energy field. It's the first thing my computer showed me, but it was only possible because we created the link coming through the tunnels, the only reason they could get in. And he says, as I suspected, there were probably conflicts of interest between those who built the pyramid or had access to it. In the first part of the tunnel, he's saying there's some kind of conflict inside this tunnel. And he says, in the first part of this tunnel, which I see is more negligently built, there seems to be some relics, there's some recordings of some kind, and remains of objects, but I'm not sure what they were. I think there were misunderstandings and conflicts between these people making the tunnel. And
this is all still in Egypt right now. They're talking about the tunnel that's trying to do the beeline to this. This, perhaps we might call them the Akashic Records or the Hall of not Akashic, the Halls of Amenti, but definitely a holographic library.
Yeah, that's what they're calling the occult chamber. So yeah, this guy's talking about it and says, actually, I've been in that tunnel. It's a more complicated story about which I don't have approval to talk. The decision factors from whom I received these orders must have been mentioned, but they are at the highest level. To give you an idea, all governmental institutions, including the Army and the Secret Services, are indirectly subordinate to those whom I represent.
So there's like a cabal type presence there that's like preventing everyone else from getting access to it. So they kind of put the kibosh on letting that tunnel get completely to that chamber, and so they diverted. And then did they have a presumed reason for diverting? And why not just stop digging? Why keep digging but in a different direction?
Well, that's part of the mystery. He starts talking about this stuff, which is pretty highly classified, but he's kind of just stunned by the fact that this guy in there with them with his fancy laptop actually detected this tunnel coming from the Great Pyramid, which he didn't expect. But once he did, he was like, oh, well, I was actually part of this secret project that went and explored that thing. And so that's what he's telling him now. And there's a little bit more of that too that I think is worth reading too. But I'll just continue this. It says, the tunnel was discovered in 2001 by a team of American and British researchers. I'll skip other details and get to the part where I was directly involved. They soon realized that
Ali Hawass was around there around that time. Was he's being shushed?
2001, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he always was, but he said, I received the order to join a small team that was supposed to do research and create an inventory of the tunnel. The information security level was maximal. I entered the tunnel, and I can say that the first part, where the trajectory is straight, is entirely covered in a rough material, a special alloy which we later analyzed in our labs. Actually, it turned out to be a fine film with a strange color which varied between yellow and silver. Just as the hologram showed, I was amazed by the shape of the tunnel, triangular with the top upward. And then he says, did you find anything else? Yes, there were several objects. Towards the end of the straight part, we found a kind of information tablet that was like a portable computer. It was actually a surprisingly light metal sheet, a maximum of 3 millimeters thick, and in the lower side, it had certain areas which were slightly in relief due to different colors and geometric shapes. And I'm just skipping through a couple of these little sections here, really important. There were many unknown signs on that tablet, like writing. It wasn't from Earth. On the upper half, the tablet was like a mirror, and I realized it might be a small screen. And he says, I can't reveal certain aspects to you. I don't know if it was okay I talked about this. After all, it was a surprise for me to find out that Aiden discovered the tunnel and to understand what its real target was. Because this guy, when he had first explored it, he had no idea about the chamber they were in then. And he says, now things seem clearer, but back then nobody understood the real meaning of the tunnel, which changed direction because we had no further information. He says, I'm sorry, I can't give you any more details. What I can say is that we know for sure that the ones who constructed the tunnel under the Great Pyramid were a different civilization than the ones who constructed the occult chamber or the projection chamber. So we have solid evidence to support this. We all then looked at Truho with questioning eyes, and here it is right here. He says, after a brief hesitation, he said in a dull voice, yes, they're different, both from us and from the mysterious civilization whose representatives seem to be giants, like the Anunnaki and the Romanian one. He said, those who had access to the pyramid and dug the tunnel are of reptilian type. We found a skeleton of one of them in the tunnel. There was an overwhelming silence in the room.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a block. I mean that's a bombshell there that they found.
Yeah, just the last sentence here is like, there was obviously for some reason, a battle in the tunnel at a certain moment. One of the beings was killed and left there. The tunnel was sealed and its entrance is hidden in a very complicated way in the structure of the pyramid. The lab dating shows, with a relatively small margin of error, the period between 8,500 and 9,000 BC.
Wow. And then 9,000, so around 9, 10, 11,000 BC is when a lot of people, date the Great Flood, the deluge, and that was supposed to be, attributed to the fall of Atlantis. And so a lot of that lines up there. That's fascinating. What I'd love to do, Trevor, is I mean, there's a lot of graphical materials that and maps that we'll have to put back on here, and links to some of this. We're coming to a close for the segment. I was wondering if you could speak to, you have a whole website, and in addition to what you've already spoken to, like a line of research and documentaries, and can you speak to that a bit? Because I want to introduce the audience more to you.
Yeah, sure. So I do have a website. It's got nothing up there now. There's like 1 or 2 useful pages, but
yet his website isn't up yet, or is it where he wants it to be quite yet? But
yeah, it's there. It's called opusmagnum.org, but I'm just in the process of finally moving it onto a private server, and so I've never been able to put anything up on it, but soon I will. So once we get on a private server, that's going to be awesome. A friend is helping me with that now. I do have, I would direct everyone to my YouTube channel. That's just called Trevor Grassi. That's got all my series. I would ask people to watch. The new film is called The Biondi Protocol. The interview with Armando and Filippo. The most important series is probably the Secret Underworld of Giza. Is a 3-part series with William Brown. And we are about to release part 4, probably, and part 5, if not part 6. Because there's a lot to come out in that series soon. And I have this other one, Revealing NC2, which is with Richard Gabriel. And if you watch those series on my channel, you're going to see a lot of context about the Giza underworld that has not been known and that you really will not find anywhere else. This work of William and Richard, nobody has been reporting on this besides a couple friends and myself. But it hasn't reached the mainstream. It's in the most important. And then I'm on Facebook. If you want to contact me, is I don't know what that sound is. That's not me, by the way. But yeah, I'm on Facebook. If you want to send me a message. And yeah, I've got another film coming out tomorrow, I should say. I'm really proud of this one, actually. It's a really important one. It's about the Gosford glyphs, which are Egyptian hieroglyphs in Australia, carved in a native bedrock of Australia. And my friend Mohammed Ibrahim and with another friend Yusuf Avian, they've authenticated these hieroglyphs. And I got Mohammed to join me in talking with my friend Vicky Burke, who lives in Australia in the Carry-On district next to these glyphs. And there's all this other sacred land right around there. There are structures underground, things like buildings. There's a whole pyramid called the Gympie Pyramid.
The Gympie Pyramid in Australia?
Yeah, it was in Australia. It was completely destroyed and dismantled. They took these stones and threw them in the ocean. They built other stuff with it. They dismantled this thing. And they are destroying the Gosford glyphs. They're sending in gangs of private contractors sanctioned by official, the government is going in there and targeting and destroying this stuff. That is so important.
That is horrible.
It's atrocious. I couldn't even believe it. I've known the story too because I've been talking to Vicky about this. She's been working with the indigenous, with the people most connected to that land and staying up trying to protect it. And they've got an election coming up on May 3rd, a federal election in Australia. We're trying to get this lady elected who is the only person.
Unfortunately, they don't have the Second Amendment in Australia to right to bear arms, and that really hurt the people when the scamdemic hit, and they literally sent in people into Aboriginal communities, and these people were armed, and they forced many of the Aboriginals who did not want to roll up their sleeves to indeed get jabbed. And since then, there have been many health problems seen in that community, or the Aboriginal communities, just like all the others. And many of them did not want it.
Yeah, some of this stuff is so heartbreaking to see it, but I'm so glad that she and Muhammad both gave amazing presentations in this. It's coming out tomorrow at I think it's 6 p.m. Eastern on my channel. But it's amazing. Vicky's been fighting for so long. So much respect for her doing this, and I was so glad to be able to get her whole story out, because it's one thing after another. You can't believe what she's showing you, before and after pictures of them destroying this stuff. It's such an important site. It's so important. So yeah, we want to see if we can protect that. And she just gave all these lists of people that can be contacted and ways everyone can be active.
If anyone wants to contact her to help save these petroglyphs in that part of Australia, is there any way that our viewers can reach her?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually linked her Facebook page from the description of that film, and that link is already up on Facebook for tomorrow, so you can see it there.
How do you spell her name?
Vicki Burke. Vicki Burke. Yeah, you could just find her on Facebook.
Excellent.
Yeah, she came to Egypt when I was there last year. We spent a long time on the plateau and showed her around. And she's become a good friend, as well as Muhammad.
So when do you expect to go back to Egypt? Is it really contingent upon your colleagues perhaps getting permits to explore or excavate in whatever fashion from the Egyptian government?
Well, if we get our permit, then yeah, I'm going to be there. But the work season is basically from September on, like to spring. They don't really do digs in the summer. It's too hot. So.
It's too hot, right? Okay.
Yeah, I want to make sure it's, part of me is a little bit like maybe it's not super safe even for me right now, because not that it's not safe for it's safe for everyone, but I've kind of been kicking the hornet's nest, as I say, pretty hard. There's a lot of people that might not like the films I've been making, but
so don't go drinking alone at night in the Egyptian bazaars, smoking hash all alone, is what you're trying to say?
Yeah, well, I should be cautious at least about being there for the time being, to be honest. But I think it's going to be fine, especially if we go with a tour group or something, which I'm working on seeing if I can set up a tour possibly for this year.
Oh, I want to help you with that. We can speak about that offline, and then I've got some more people to introduce you to, and there's a lot of synergies there. And then as our platform launches in the coming months and we go forward, sacred site tour groups with people knowledgeable like yourself, and then people who are psychically gifted, such as Sean Bond of the psionicleague.com and his partner Isha Arzleeb. They're both very psychically gifted, and it's kind of like, I see it as the X Factor these days, or ufology 2.0, where we're getting the leading people, boots on the ground, no fear, combined with the people who have all sorts of psychic abilities, and combining all of our talents together to get the answers that have been suppressed and hidden from us all along. I mean, here you are, you want to go back, but you fear for your safety, because there are probably secret societies who don't want you digging up the gold and treasure and technology and magical items that they want. They'd rather the whole world be totally ignorant and they get to hoard it all.
Yeah, well, we've exposed a lot of corruption, and all three, me, William, and Richard, are on a lot of lists to say that. Where it's like,
what are their full names? Richard who and William who?
Richard Gabriel and William Brown. So they're the two mini series I have on my channel about them. We call out a lot of really bad stuff.
And this is the Opus Magnum channel on YouTube?
It's just the Trevor Grassi. It's called Trevor Grassi.
Okay, Trevor Grassi on YouTube.
That's the website. But yeah. And I think it's going to be fine. I'm not I never have any fear about it. It's like they want to take me, I think, to do that. But I'll restate like I have been. I'm not suicidal. I never will be. I don't believe in that. I'm a very happy person, especially now because my life purpose is this is my moment.
You're
honestly.
being fulfilled. You're like on the world stage. Like I met you a year ago or 2 years ago, maybe, and now here you are, literally on the world stage on such and what a great thing to be on the world stage for, because we've had everyone from Edgar Casey to so many speaking about, and I believe Dolores Cannon as well, speaking to discoveries under the Great Pyramids. And here you are. You were in Egypt at the time. Our friends Tyler Koala and Lily Nova were also over there at the same time, too. Tyler Koala is with Aaron Kuhn of Journey to Truth, and I see them as comrades in the full disclosure movement. Like, we're all doing the work, and you can't be more boots on the ground than in Giza, as the worldwide announcement is made, and all eyes are turned that way at once.
Yeah, that was funny. I saw was telling Lily about that. At least before they went directly on the 15th, which was the day of the press conference, right, when all this stuff came out. Lily and Tyler, and I'm gonna go talk with them on their show soon. As well as Isha.
Yep, Isha. Mm-hmm.
Talk with her soon too. We're gonna talk about it more. Talking about stuff, especially with some other people. I've got a few other series coming out that are really exciting, but more than I can list right now. There's a lot of other events coming up. I will say the Cosmic Summit in North Carolina is the next one in June. I'm going to be there with Armando and Filippo and all these other amazing speakers. That's going to be a really fun one. And yeah, I'm hoping, pretty sure at this point, that I can make it down to the full disclosure this year. I'll give it a 95% at least. But
we're going to make sure that happens, Trevor.
Yeah, I think what we were talking about today, it sounds like it can work out. But what's the last thing I was just going to mention about that? Other events. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what I was going to say, but there are a few other conferences. Oh, going back to Egypt, there's a very exciting conference coming up in November, and it's going to be near Egypt. And I'm thinking I might just hop over at that point, because I have two different friends both leading tours there at that time, like 11/11 basically. I might be back in Egypt. It's going to be
wow, 11/11/2025 back in Egypt would be, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, I was in Egypt on 11/11 last year actually, and I was thinking about setting up a tour right for that. But my buddy Mike Rixiker and Mohammed Ibrahim, who's in this film about Australia tomorrow as well, they're doing a tour then. It actually starts on 11/11 and ends on 11/23, which is the I call it Fibonacci Day. The Fibonacci sequence begins with 1, 1, 2, 3. So it's a great numerical lineup. And then the other one going on at that same time is Patricia Aoyan, another friend of mine from the Kemet School of Ancient Mysticism, is doing a tour with Veda Austin. Do you know Veda Austin? She does amazing, mind-blowing research on water and water's memory power, water's connection to consciousness. She's working
similar to the work of Dr. Emoto, of how
like
water can hold.
Emoto, like times 10, times 100. It's going beyond. It's amazing.
Beyond, because he was a while ago, and so sounds like she's taking it further.
No discredit to him whatsoever. He was amazing what he did, but she's taking that concept so much further. She does these experiments. She has a process where she'll take a petri dish of water, and then she'll put underneath it, say, a photograph or something, and then for like 30 seconds, and then she removes the photograph from it. It's liquid water in a petri dish. She puts it in the freezer and half freezes it to a point where you see that image in the water when it freezes.
It's wild. It is wild. So that's her. I would love to be introduced to her. That's definitely worthy of an episode or two right there. And speak. Please introduce me sometime. But speaking to all the your film projects and your all your writings, where book one even is up to 3,000 pages long, and since you've become
But yeah, the full series, it's over 3,000.
3,000 pages, so for the full series. But you are now on the world stage and in very high demand. So I want to thank you once again, Trevor, for taking the time to help me launch the Full Disclosure Network platform. Where this is our first live. We didn't get any much advance notice out there because we're putting it all together. But this is, so kind of consider it a soft launch. But I want to thank you for being my very first guest, especially at this time. It's so important, and you are on the forefront, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me of what I was just thinking to say also, which is that I want to thank the Copper Project for what they did in terms of like making me this. They let me release that project abstract, which I thought everyone at the conference was going to be releasing, but it was only me, and it was like almost like I didn't realize it was going to be. I don't know how much they realized, but they gave me permission, and they basically made me blow up, and that was really good in terms of what we were talking about. And, me and Bill and Richard being highly at risk because of all this corruption we've exposed, but then nobody knows who we are either. I'm just putting it out on my.
Because are you saying because you and your colleagues have exposed corruption? Are you talking in Egypt in terms of like the cover up of a lot of what's really going on there? And so you've had to do some guerrilla archaeology, like you've had to get locals to bring you to these entrances of these sites that sometimes a lot of times are locked or people don't know about them. And if you didn't have local guidance, you wouldn't find it. And if the authorities knew what you were trying to do, they would probably stop you.
Yeah, well, it was extremely dangerous for us to be exposing that stuff when no one knew what we were. So now that the world is paying attention and knows my name and my face, and that of Bill and Richard, it's protected us a lot more.
I see. Because you were doing the Indiana Jones stuff before it was known about and cool. Now that it's known about, that brings you a level of protection because everyone's going to know that Trevor is a very happy person, very glad to be here, and wants to continue to advance this amazing disclosure work that he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's looking good. And of course, I want to thank you so much for this because it's an honor to be the first guest on your new platform. I really feel so blessed to, it's like I suddenly became the hot chick in the room, if you want to call it that. But
I knew you were going to become the hot chick in the room before you became the hot chick in the room.
So when everyone started asking me for interviews, I'm first looking back to the people who were there for me, before it was cool. And you were one of the people that was supporting me. We became good friends before we got popular or whatever.
It means a lot. I mean, it means a lot to me. In my work, the people who have materially supported me all the way up until now, versus all the people who've given lip service when we're launched and we're a fully operational life star. I'm definitely going to give priority. I'm not going to ignore people, but I'm going to give priority to the people, those of us who were there at the beginning. I'm grateful for that. I want to thank. Yeah.
I see that you are focusing on the people who have integrity. And that's why I'm so happy, to work with you. I've already met you in person. I already understand that's your thing. You're a person of integrity. And that you're trying to get other people's message out with the same. So I'm not working with any of these big ego types. I only work with people who are very simply dedicated to finding the truth and sharing it. So that's why I'm working with Bill and Richard. That's why I'm working with the Italians, because these are people with integrity who are dedicating their lives to doing just that. They want the truth and share the truth. That's
because if we don't, we don't work with people of integrity, and there's gatekeeping and there's mixed messaging, and we have seen that in other parts of the community. So it's use your discernment by getting all of us who were the uncool kids together to really reveal the truth. We're going to flip the script.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and I want to thank you once again, Trevor, and we would love to have you back. And I'm going to take us out, and the edited version of this broadcast coming out this Friday. Every Tuesday we'll be doing the live stream. Every Friday we're going to be doing the more polished, produced version. It'll have our brand new Full Disclosure theme music produced by, written and produced by Christopher James Thomas, to be found at CJT. We'll have to add that into the credits. I don't want to mangle my colleague's website off memory here. But thank you once again, Trevor, and thank you everyone for being here.